Hello, this is Masati. Welcome to my podcast, Exponential Intelligence. This is part 2 of The Reason Behind the Chaos, George Floyd. Part 1, we discussed what it's all about and what it's not. And we ended up with JFK quote, "Many know the truth already, but then do not act upon it." And that's really the reason, or that's really the problem on why things keep happening over and over again. So if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, highly recommend that before you listen to part 2. Part 2, we're going to be getting into the real reason on why this is happening, who's really in control, why it's different this time. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about why this stuff is happening, why it's happening now, and why, say, the intense transformation or the intensity of, say, action or revolt that's happening. Okay? And then part 3, my analysis of the frequencies as I walk through the war zone firsthand and what's to come. And I come from a very different level. I've had 2 near-death experiences for those who are new. So I come from a layer of consciousness that's not of this consciousness. So, and that's where I can help, and I've helped people, hundreds of thousands, transform their lives very, very quickly. So this goes outside of psychology or, say, NLP, visualization, or helping us understand this reality better. Again, so some of the people might not understand the concepts that I'm saying if this is your first podcast. So I would highly recommend going and listening back, at least 10, 15 podcasts, so you get to understand how this reality actually works. Okay, and some of you go, well, who the hell is this guy to help me understand? Because I'm really smart. I'm a scientist, and all this other stuff that people get, say, connected to. Well, it's because what I do actually has a physical rendition, a physical transformation. People actually, say, transform their lives radically. Okay, scientists that have helped, they actually get to understand the mechanics on why things happen at a much deeper level. Companies that have helped, their rendering time as far as research and development, say, drastically decreases. So I'm extending myself out here to help, say, society understand, say, the social norms and why shit happens like this. Okay, so as always, as I speak, the frequencies that I generate, you'll probably most likely feel. So it's more of a transformational podcast rather than just you listening and digesting and then, storing that knowledge somewhere and then forgetting about it later on. This is about, say, listening, and then that knowledge, you start to become the knowledge as you start to, say, enhance or improve yourself. Okay? So that's why you might be feeling, say, different as you listen to this podcast. So let's take a deep breath in. So George Floyd, why did one black man, spur literally a city, Minneapolis, to, well, for the most part, in certain areas, and it seems like it's expanding as we speak, go under destruction? There has to be, say, a deeper reason, right? Because even, say, Rodney King's murder and some of the other murders, and then also all the way back to, say, the riots, before blacks were free, didn't spur, say, this much intensity. So what's behind that? So that's what we're going to get to. And again, this I see from a very different level than, say, the surface level, say, reasonings why. Because there's always, say, an exception to the rule at the surface level. Right? And then, the news media tells you one thing, other individuals tell you another thing, conspiracy theorists tells you something else. So who are you going to believe, right? Especially nowadays, you'll start to see that you'll start to see, say, the news media that is, say, tainted or pushing their agenda on you, as they start to lose control, they're going to be, say, pushing against the other news platforms and telling you that they're lying. So be mindful of that. Okay? That's just an aside. So why is this happening? Okay, and I want to share a story with you that you might have heard before, me telling you, okay, because it's so important for this. So if you've heard this, again, re-listen to it, and maybe you might understand it at a deeper level. Okay, so back in I think World War II, the Allies, they were afraid that, say, the Nazis were going to create this atom bomb. So what they did, they hired great minds like Einstein, other individuals, to hurry up and, say, create this atom bomb. So they would have it before the enemies would have it. But at a higher consciousness, okay, say the consciousness of destruction, okay, or the evolution of what humanity has come to, okay, it didn't matter if the Allies dropped the bomb or the enemies dropped the bomb. The point is that the consciousness that, say, had created the idea of the atom bomb dictates that it had to be dropped. So at a higher level, again, it doesn't matter which side dropped it. The point is that it destroyed humanity. If that makes sense to you. So at the lower level, the Allies would go, it's a good thing that we designed it first, so the enemy wouldn't take advantage of us. But then, again, you destroyed lives, you destroyed millions of lives through the process. So again, it didn't matter who dropped what, right? So if you think of it another way, giving you another example, say you have an individual with an agenda, right? And then you have, say, two parties, and they bicker and fight against each other. And then for the masses, you would think that those two parties are in control because they would lead, say, the country or the world. Okay, but on the back end, right? So whichever party wins, for example, doesn't really matter, because overall, whether you come at it from the left side or you come at it from the right side, the agenda of the real leaders, the leaders behind, say, the puppet leaders, are met. And that's the standard. That's why it doesn't really matter, again, the good or bad. Right? Or the left or the right in this case. Or even, say, the good and bad. It doesn't really matter. The point is that the agenda is met. Okay? And that's dictated by the consciousness or the level of awakening that, say, humanity has risen to. Okay? It's an evolutionary process. Think of it that way. Okay? So let me talk about evolution for a bit, and then it'll set the parameters on, say, George Floyd's death and the riots that's occurring. By the way, I predicted this years ago. That grand separation. So let's take another deep breath in. So let's talk about evolution for just a few minutes here. So evolution in say nature or the animal kingdom is that the animal or plants or even, say, rock structures and so on like that, they start to evolve and they get better and better and better, right? They get more and more efficient. Certain shapes, certain, say, bone structures, certain whatever, again, become more and more efficient. They get honed, they get, say, perfected, right? For example, if, say, there was a disease like heart issues in a certain, say, species, like, say, the cat family. Again, I'm not talking about domesticated cats, but just nature. Raw nature, cats, animal, wild. In a very short time, that disease would be eliminated after maybe, at max, say, 2 generations. But again, after that first generation, second generation, that disease would be no more. Okay? Again, that's how natural evolution works. Okay? In human standards, that it doesn't work that way. Okay? In human standards, we hold on to our diseases. We don't get better and better as, say, we evolve or as we go from generation to generation to generation. Okay? In nature standards, what happens is that there's a filtering process. What worked stays on and gets better. What didn't work gets deleted out of, say, that cell structure or the memory of the cell structure, or down into, say, the genomes or the DNA of that cell for that specific animal. By the way, it's not just, say, of that specific species, because we're all interconnected at a much deeper level. So say a grapefruit, for example, finds a better way to protect itself from a virus. Okay, that would transcend through the animal kingdom and even humans. And then what would happen is that, say, even the animal world would, say, somehow evolve and protect itself from that virus. Okay, so back to humans. So that opportunity is available to us because we're all, again, united or interconnected. Unfortunately, the humans have, say, free will or a mind of consciousness of their own. On the natural side, they're in time, in present moment time, so they can't dictate what happens to them. They're just resonating with, say, present moment time, which always, say, maintains abundance to its highest, say, form. It always renders itself, if you are, say, in present in time, it always renders itself to its highest form. Now you might think, well, shit dies. Well, of course they die, but then again, it evolves itself into a higher form. Okay? So there is a life cycle, but with every life cycle, it gives it an opportunity to grow and expand and get better and better. Okay? So now that we understand that in human consciousness, what happens is that we have a decision-making process. At some level, obviously, we got distorted because you are a rendering of, your parents. Your parents' heart issues, distortions, abuse patterns, intellects, and all that other stuff. So, and then grandparents and great-grandparents, and so on, so on, so on, so on, so on. So that filtering process, right, of removing the distortions or illnesses or inconsistencies to keep us present moment time, somehow it didn't work in humans, right, because we have that free will or that consciousness. So what happens is that, well, we get stuck in time and we keep repeating the same patterns. So, and as we keep repeating the same pattern, the consciousness, say, expands of that pattern. So that means, say, control mechanisms, worship type mechanisms, abuse patterns, and success patterns, joy patterns, happiness patterns, those things expand as well. But over time, what happens is that, again, say, the distorted patterns, say, control us over more and more and more. Because, say, in a life that's good, you have, say, a negative aspect of it, you focus on that negative aspect. So, and then that gets, say, burnt into the cellular memory, and then that cell produces, and hence, over time, say more and more, say, distorted frequencies come about. That makes sense to you. So part of the distorted frequencies is control mechanisms, right? So war, it gets worse and worse and worse as it goes by. Control gets worse and worse and worse as it goes by. It's not freedom, although you think we're in a free society. Over time, you've seen that from back in the day till now, we're actually more, say, constricted than ever. Right? At a deeper level. Are there more freedoms? Yes, you have more choices. You have more probabilities. You have more of an abundance, which allows you to think that you're, say, free. The poor individual of 50 years ago compared to a poor individual of today's standard, again, they would look pretty rich. But again, the constriction is still upon that poor individual. Okay, so the luxury items, the way we go through, say, the ease of life that we go through, the standards of living that we go through, yes, that's been elevated, but you are still, say, a prisoner of all those technologies. And then also now with environmental issues that are happening, we're more constricted. And then look at this, the COVID environment, right? That's just a sign. That's just an outer expression of what's happened at a higher frequency level. Okay? It's just literally showing you how, say, constricted this consciousness has become. So, as we take a deep breath in, so what's happening is that, again, evolution is working in perfection. And evolution basically predicates that whatever that we hold on to, okay, whatever that we deem are in our DNA, in our conscious DNA, or even in your physical cellular DNA, gets reproduced. So as, say, we reproduce, what are we reproducing? Again, more control, more disease, more abuse, right? More prejudice, and so on. So now we have that platform. Now we have that stage set. Back to George Floyd. So why is he so important? Well, and then we'll get into, say, the personal readings. I'll read George Floyd. I'll read the officer that was the culprit, and see. And normally I wouldn't read, say, personal frequencies, but since it's changing, say, the impact, it's impacting humanity, I have authority, say, to read, say, publicly, anybody that has, that wants to or can impact authority. So in the future, I'll be reading, like, say, presidents or control mechanisms or George Soros or the Rothschilds and so on like that for you, just tell you all aspects of them. So, and just as a side note, say I read something and something negative comes out and those people want to ban me and so on like that, it doesn't really matter because the consciousness is awakened. I'm awakened, so you can't really say destroy consciousness that's awakened. Okay, you can destroy a person, but you can't destroy, especially at the level that I'm at. Actually, they'd be a lot worse off because that consciousness is very vicious once you try to destroy it and it's awakened. Okay, no matter how, say, powerful somebody might be, this consciousness is much more powerful. Okay, so again, that's a side note. So where was I? So the story back to on why this has happened and why it's become, say, such an impactful or tragic or an expansive situation, right? Why did, say, a death of one individual, say, expand? Well, it was, say, a breaking point for this consciousness. Okay, so let me explain. And again, a lot of predictions that I said about a couple of years ago coming true is that, and this is where this, say, stage has to be set for you, especially for new people. And it's good to hear as well if you've been with me before, because you'll get a different nuance. Okay, so I've called it a purity wave coming through. Okay? So the purity wave, it's not a second coming of somebody. It's not awakening. It is an awakening process, but very different than, say, a religious or spiritual or whatever people might label it. It's basically about time and space. I'm not going to get into all the details. I've talked about that because this is about George Floyd. Okay, so I'll talk about, say, this aspect and then the separation of, say, society. So as this consciousness comes through, time and space becomes more efficient. It has to. So it's not just, well, what's happening to humanity or what's happening to this world of humans, right? It's a universal, say, transformation. So throughout the universe, the multiverse, time and space are becoming more efficient. So that means that that the distortions, the heaviness, the abuse patterns, and all that cannot hold itself in this reality any longer. Okay, because there has to be, say, density. So, and I'll just explain it briefly. Right, when we're creating an identity or a reality here, we're all created of frequencies. Right, so the more awakened we are, the less dense we are. So to create this much density that we have in this reality, right, and it's a new experiment, and just like with any new experiment or new invention, it's pretty clunky. Right, say like the first cell phone, it was pretty big, it was a briefcase, right? And then over time it got more and more efficient, and then we have a handheld, which is more powerful than a lot of the computers back in the day. Okay? So the same thing with time and space. At first when it was created, and again, trillions of years ago, it was very clunky. Nothing could exist, but now we've gotten more and more efficient into a life form that's, well, as complicated or as brilliant as, say, a human form. That takes a lot of efficiency. That takes a lot of transformation, right? Or ingenuity. Again, it's all about time and space recreating itself or rendering itself differently. So as this consciousness becomes lighter and more efficient, right, there's lots of fantastic things that are going to come about on this. So it's a great new beginning for us. And again, it's happened before. And every time this wave of, say, time and space becoming more efficient or more, I would say, high performance, okay, what happens is that more things get peeled away. Okay? The heaviness, the distortions, the abuse patterns get peeled away. So over time, layers and layers and layers, like an onion layer, gets peeled away. Okay? And then also another aspect of this is that, say, the layer that the consciousness was at, right? It's a heavy layer, and then gets peeled away. Well, when things get peeled away, it unveils the heaviness or the darkness, the control mechanisms, the distortion, the lies, and so on that existed in that consciousness. And that's what's happening now. So as this layer of this purity wave that's washing through is washing or peeling away all the lies, all the control mechanisms, all the distortions, whether at an individual level or at, say, a government level and beyond, that control this world, all their lies, their communications, and whatever else that they've hidden cannot be hidden anymore, because the consciousness, say, cannot hold that space. Right? And for some of you, it's like, shit, that guy's way out there. But in reality, I'm really not. I'm just giving you an overview on, say, how this reality really helps, or how this reality really works. Okay, you might think that you're in control of your life. You're not. You're in a consciousness, and that dictates certain parameters that you have access to. Okay? The world leaders, or even those beyond, so-called elite leaders, they think they're in control because they're connected to a power. They're not. They're just running from, say, the same distortions, okay, or the same set of tools, and distorting it to control people because they're very weak. So they have to control more people. That's another podcast. Okay, so let's go back to Floyd, and then there's one more piece before we get back to George. Okay, is about evolution. Remember, I said that, say, a grapefruit finds a way to, say, fend off a virus, right? The animal society and nature and plants and so on will use that knowledge not to control people or anything of that nature. Okay? It'll use it to better itself, because in nature nobody has to, or nothing has to, control other things, and that's where that balance and harmony happens. Okay? In human society, so say that virus that comes from a grapefruit, and I'm not saying COVID comes from a grapefruit. I'm just giving you an example. Okay, so that same knowledge, whether it comes from a grapefruit or say a monkey learns how to use a tool, right? It'll spread through that knowledge will spread through the consciousness that's here, and it'll enhance everybody at a level, to a higher level. So in humans, that advancement in consciousness that will say evolve people, or evolve humans and plants and so on. In humans, they get the same consciousness, but what happens is that since we're not awakened and we didn't let go of our old patterns, and our main pattern is of control, right? Control and say lack or greed, basically. So that knowledge, say for example, of a virus that'll come through, well, then there'd be people to go, shit, we can use this to control more. So whatever, say, comes into the pipeline for us to evolve is always based on what we use it to control. So this is where anything that comes through, no matter what technology it is, it's always about, say, using it to take control. Okay? So let me just explain that a little bit. Say, for example, Tesla, and then I promise we'll get to George Floyd. So Tesla, where did he get his inventions? He was at a consciousness of, say, a 4, and I'm just throwing these numbers out. So he would swoop up to consciousness of 5 or maybe 6, the next layer up, right? And then he'd come back down, and then he would use that consciousness or that invention from a higher level consciousness down into this consciousness and replicate it. Okay? And that's where, say, some of the issues that he had, because he had a lot of fantastic ideas, but those fantastic ideas would be really beneficial at a higher level consciousness. It wouldn't be used for destructive purposes. But unfortunately, you bring them down to a low level, archaic type consciousness, again, human society. What happens is that tool that would have benefited individuals from a higher consciousness is now used for a destructive force in human society. Okay? So that's how, again, a consciousness works. So and then some people might think, well, it's because some inventor, invented or thought of this. No, they didn't. It's just that the consciousness, say, awakened or came down or, got thinner and you merged, and then that's where, say, a new technology, new advancements and new possibilities that people are tapping into, okay, is about transparency. So, or efficiencies, because this consciousness that is coming through is about efficiency. It's about, say, bigger, better opportunities for not just technological advances, but human development, human potential. Okay? But what have we done with it? Think of it. Over the decade, technology has advanced so far. Humans have been subordinated, right? Instead of pushing the human potential, and there's great motivational speakers, there's great heads of companies. Elon Musk, they're thinking, well, shit, we need wires and mechanisms and robots, tiny robots in our brains to kill cancer and all that stuff. Well, fuck, what if we just used our human potential, the possibilities of healing ourselves? Maybe there's no money in it, but maybe there is. I see great fortune for those who can tap in to the human potential and teach other people. That's where it's at. Okay? But we're missing the boat because of the control mechanisms. So what does this have to happen to do with the chaos? Okay? With this new upgrade that we've gotten, right? We've say successfully. I wouldn't say successfully because it's it's forced upon us. It's not like we did good as humans and then we get to the next level, or we won this level and then we get. It's just like over time, the universe changes, and humans are in the universe, so we get changed as well. Okay? But we don't understand that, because most humans think that, well, fuck, we're the center of the universe, and then everything revolves about us, and as we, it's up to us when we develop, or it's up to the UN or whoever to do this about this and that about that. Got nothing to do with them. They just pick up these ideas and then make them their own. That's the key. So this reality, this consciousness, is about what? Transparency. Because we need to be more efficient. We need to be more congruent. Because if there was transparency, just think of all the bullshit that would go away. Right? So, although we're at a lower level, but the advancement is massive. So that disparity, that's where the problem is. And that's where, say, prejudice, that's where judgment, that's where hatred, that's where all the, say, human emotions that have to keep control. Right? Because we're losing ourselves. So those things have to get tighter and tighter. So this is where prejudice against anybody, anything, even animals, children, whatever, old people, sick people, handicapped people, whatever it might be, right? This gets worse. It gets worse and worse and worse as time goes by. And that's what's happening. So if you look through all the protests, in this case, right, the rioting and so on like that, it's like the worst rioting ever. And you might think, well, it's just because we're fed up with all this stuff. We can't take it anymore. Yeah, that could be true. But the underlying reason why you're fed up with this stuff, can't take it anymore, is because this thing has to explode. Okay? So let me talk about that. So just before we finish the story of, say, the transparency coming through. Okay, so this is an example of people taking ownership of what's not theirs and then using it for a negative purpose. So just like the atom bomb and then some of the inventions that Tesla, say, brought about that are used for negative purposes that we don't even know about. So this consciousness, say, dictates that transparency happens, right? Higher minds, I'm not saying intelligent minds, but higher minds that have access to, say, the frequencies, right? Like radio receivers, right? They're distorted, they're control freaks, whatever it might be. I don't know, they've sold themselves to Satan, however you want to label it, I don't care. They're intuitive, right? That's how they got to where they got, right? By control and manipulation of, say, the consciousness or the inventions or the ideas or concepts of the consciousness. Simple as that. Although they could have flipped it around and they helped the masses with it, and they would have evolved even more without, say, destruction of themselves. But they didn't do that. That's another podcast. So what happens now is that transparency is needed in this new reality. So somebody locks into the concept of, oh shit, we need transparency in our lives, right? Everybody knows about everybody else. Right? Everybody knows all the details, so you can't hide the distortions or all that. Right? It's an efficiency system. It was actually meant for you to help one another understand each other. It's like, oh, this person is lacking in so and so. Let me help them upgrade themselves. Basically, what I do, I use the transparency because I can read anybody. I don't care who it is. I don't care their heads of state. Again, the dark web, the deep state. Whoever, dead or alive. I have access to all your records. Okay? Simply put, it doesn't matter. I have access. So that's real control. So with that in mind, I use it properly because I don't use it to manipulate you. I don't use it to control you. I use it to free you. I don't need to manipulate you by knowing your weaknesses to control you. Okay? So, the wrong way to use, say, this transparency is, well, like Google, Facebook, the government, right? It's a one-way mechanism. That's the problem. There's no transparency, like Snowden and Julian, right? It's like, hey, we need transparency. We need to know what's going on both sides. But then somebody, like I said, fucked it up, and they go, shit, this is a great opportunity for more control, more greed, more money. That's where it all comes. So with that, all that stuff in mind, a consciousness that is about efficiency and purity is now fucked up. And now we have to use COVID, we have to use Black Lives Matter, we have to create all this disinformation to stay in control. So what's the difference? The difference is that humanity, because they have free will, okay? Humanity has to catch up because it's slowing down, say, the evolution of the universal, say, clock or the universal wave that's coming through. Okay? Now, we got, say, updated, or I don't know if you guys received the memo about 2020 years ago. Said there was a memo sent out. It said, hey, we need to catch up. We need to awaken to stay in tune. And I don't know if a lot of us listened to that memo, or some people say may have listened to that memo, but they got it wrong. They misinterpreted it. So this universal wave that is coming through, what happens is like, hey, we're all in the same boat. Okay? Nature, the universe, the multiverses, all those, they upgrade the galactic system, if you want to call it up, other space-time continuums, because we're not the only thing. This goes way beyond the Big Bang. Like scientists and even Stephen Hawking, he thinks that this is just the only universe. It's just one Big Bang. Hell no. This is just a miniature, a tiny slice compared to what's out there. So just think of it. We're not the only ones, right? We're not the only ones in this universe, much less all the other multiverses that are there. So as a whole, we're all elevating. The only thing that's kept us down, again, is a highly evolved being or spirit level that's created, say, form so dense that, say, it's very intelligent, although very destructive, because it doesn't know its power. And that's the human species. So as we take a deep breath in, so what's happening is that, and you can see the heaviness, or actually at least I am. So what's happening, this wave is going, hey guys, knocking on the door, go, hey guys, it's time to upgrade. It's time to move on. It's time to leave your bullshit behind, right? And this wave, no matter who you are, is, say, destroying this reality and rebuilding it properly, whether you're ready for it or not. Okay? So just imagine this. Say you have a knock on the door or a memo that goes, hey, in 2020, what we're going to do is we're going to upgrade whether you're ready or not. So let me give you an example. You're living in a city. Okay? You're living in a city, and then you get this memo. It's like, hey guys, you know what? In the future, what's going to happen in your city is that a new system is going to come through. We're just going to tear everything down, okay, and then rebuild properly, okay, for the next wave that's coming up, because the old infrastructure is not going to handle this new pattern, this new system. So financial institutions, religious, and political, obviously, from the to a country scale, a world scale, right down to the single individual. And we're not just talking about socioeconomics and the structure of how humans work here. That's or going to work and all that stuff, or careers and all the stuff that humans are worried about. It's a whole different identity of how humans render themselves. Remember, I was talking about how animals evolve to their best possible self, generation after generation, right? They never go fucking backwards. You've never seen, say, species go backwards or they die off. And even extinction, by the way, natural extinction, not man-made extinction, is because you'll soon find out that a next generation or another species of similar, a better version, so it hopped into a higher version of itself, not the next level of itself. So that would be, true extinction would be, say, a super evolution. Okay? Again, that's another podcast topic. If you have questions, xi@masajati.com. So in humanity, the human consciousness, what happens? We're still fucking back in this, Stone Age. We're so primitive. Our brains haven't really evolved. The way we render ourselves here, our cellular structure, haven't evolved. That's why we age the way we do. That's why we get sick the way we do. None of this age, lack, socioeconomic status, starving children, abusing animals, all those things would never frickin' happen if we evolved. Everybody would be of wealth and abundance. Everybody, and they'd be happy. You go, well, that's not possible. Of course it's not possible in this consciousness. You can't even dream about it in this consciousness. It doesn't exist in this consciousness. It's too fucking heavy. You have to rise to a higher frequency. I've been there. I've seen it. It works. Right? But not with this much density, and that's the key. How do we get this much density and this much, say, enjoyment of being our reflection here with all the abundance that we naturally are? So that's the key. So as we take a deep breath in, so this consciousness, again, dictates that this reality has to break apart. Simple as that. Many of you who've gone through the process, right? Many of you who've gone through the process know that as I work on you, your new level, you ascend to a higher level, right? You're level 2, you go to a level, say, 10. What happens? All the distortions, all the secrets, all the lies that you think that you are, all the shortcomings that you are, they vanish, they get destroyed. Right? And you have physical proof. You can't get ill. You have to heal yourself. And this is a pleasurable experience. You have to get rid of the relationships that, can't, say, exist in you. You have to get rid of your money habits, the sense of lack, right? So you can come into true abundance. You have to get rid of the abuse pattern and so on that people crave or need or somehow, say, get connected to in relationships. Those things cannot exist for you to be in an abundant state, right? Those things have to get destroyed. Simple as that. So if you think of it, those who are XRs, you'd know exactly what this process is going through. This consciousness, or at a mass scale, the human, say, reality, has to get destroyed for this new reality to come in. And since we weren't prepared, we weren't, say, getting ready for it over time, it's happening to us all at once. Simple as that. The universe does not wait for anybody. I don't care who it is, the UN, Rothschilds, or whoever the hell they think they are. None of that stuff matters. Right? We're just a blip in time, and that blip has to go forward with the rest of, say, the plans of these multiverse. So what a great way to destroy this reality, right? Although people would take credit for it. the government is like, we have to do this. We'll spread a disease, or, it's a nature disease. Let me tell you something. If it wasn't man-made, okay, nature would come in and, say, destroy or make time stop. Okay? If it wasn't created, say, whether this death of this gentleman was real or not, it doesn't matter. Something had to happen for destruction of this reality. So you're seeing a physical rendering of what's happening at a frequency level. It's not the other way around. Your actions are not dictated by your thoughts. Okay? The actions that occur here, and again, many of you XIers know this, right? It's not your thoughts, it's not psychology, it's not a state change. Right? The underlying foundation has to change for you to use psychology the way it's used. State changes, visualization. That's something else, by the way. So this is about changing your infrastructure, and then you can use that. Same thing here as a whole, human consciousness as a whole. You get to see that it gets wiped out. You get to elevate, or you get to force yourself to elevate to a higher level. And then we rebuild. Okay? Just like I said, many of you who've gone through the process, do you notice literally that you get rid of the old shit? Or you move out, but you don't take your old garbage behind. You literally trash your stuff. So what's happening in today's society? Things are getting trashed. The riots and so on, although it might have been, say, sparked by, this killing or fake killing, whatever it might be. Again, shit doesn't matter. Some way or another, this destruction would happen. Whether it's George Soros's idea, or the government's idea, or it's a natural occurrence, it doesn't matter. Do you see why? Because this consciousness dictates that something happen to clear out this space. It doesn't matter what happens, this space needs to be cleared out for a new frequency to take over. How it happens, it's up to humans to decide. And then that's what humans are fighting about. So little or belittling compared to the possibilities that could be for humans. That's the sad part. We're holding on to 1% of our potential. And for what? We kill off our people, our own species, let alone, animals, with, I just saw this terrible picture of, the tusks being just sliced off and, allowing animals to bleed. What is that? No animals do that. By the way, the animals that do that, they're pulling in the human consciousness. That's why the humans have to change, because it's disturbing the frequency of nature, disturbing the frequency of Earth, disturbing the frequency of, say, the universe. So it's sending a ripple effect, and the universe is fighting back. It's like, hell no, this ain't gonna happen, and it's pushing back and just eliminating the cause. Okay, we've gone way too off center, by the way. And I'll show you a drawing on what I call napkin. Bad drawing, great answers on how, how, say, things will go off center, and then nature or the universal laws will force itself to go back into center. That's what's happening. Humans have, say, pulled everything way off center. And when you pull something off center, you get that tug, that memo. But then we don't listen, and it's like, boom, it snaps you back in. So we're getting snapped back in. So lucky for the XIers, you've done this a while back. So all the destruction, distortion, do you notice that society, the chaos that's happening. And this is how you can tell that XI really fucking works. It's because that all those individuals who practice XI, you guys are stable, growing, brighter, stronger, and better than ever amidst all this chaos, while anybody else has done any other motivational speakers or, I don't know, other systems, you can go to their websites and it's like, well, don't worry, it's going to come over and all that stuff. People are coming to me and they're going, well, should I be worried? Because everybody else is worried and I'm not worried. So why is that? Because it's the consciousness that you're connected to. You've already elevated to the new paradigm, the new standard before anybody else. So welcome to the club. So with George, whether it's real or not, or fake or whatever, it doesn't matter. His consciousness is coming through, wiping everything out, and then a new one is settling in. How it destroys itself, how the financial systems get destroyed, no matter who's president, no matter who's dictatorship, whoever, no matter who's in, religious power and stuff. Doesn't matter. They're just like little fleas in the whole scheme of things. Okay? Real power is within all of us. So where are we now? Well, so this is the purpose of, say, George Floyd. So as this consciousness washes through, okay, bringing new possibilities, new technologies, new probabilities, new ways of, say, rendering this reality for a better platform, a better life, not a distortive, destructive life. What happens is that all the bullshit, all the lies, all the heaviness, the mechanisms of control and abuse and so on will have to leave. So as these mechanisms of control, abuse, and everything else from this consciousness leaves, well, they're going to come up at one more time. Many of you might have experienced this through what I call detox, right? All your bullshit that you hold on to, right, has to come out. You have to deal with it. You have to rectify it and then move forward. So now what's happening is that, well, society is going through some major detox and all their stuff is coming out. And then, like some of you who have been controlled or controlling or fear. Okay? Now there's a lot of control in this society. As they start to lose control, what do people do especially when they're insecure, right? Insecure individuals want to hold on to people tighter and tighter and tighter. Well, the elites that control the government and so on, very, very insecure people, right? They're really power hungry. You think like all the wealth in the world would, say, satisfy them, and it doesn't. Why is that? Why do they have to control the masses? Okay? I'm going to be talking about that in another podcast called The Science of Satan, by the way. Okay? But just a brief here, because they're losing more and more control. They would have to clench down upon, say, the masses that they control. As this wave comes through, as it washes through, right? What happens is that, well, we lose more and more control at, again, at a high level and then at a, say, individual level. So what do? We clamp down. Okay? And as we clamp down, we get more comfortable with, say, what we've known in the past to control. Okay? So I'll say that again. As things become more unstable, as this reality becomes more unstable, okay, what'll happen is, or as people become more unstable, what do they naturally do? They'll go back and they'll revert back to whatever that they were, say, comfortable with, not with whatever that worked, but whatever, say, they were comfortable with that deemed, say, control. Okay? So not the smartest thing, but again, whatever that they had used to, say, create stability. Okay? So what that means is, like, say, for people of, say, white people, for example. Okay? So they would control, say, the blacks, the Chinese, well, everybody, basically, right? To be in that control space. So, and then, say, the blacks or the Chinese or, whoever else, they would run their patterns as well. Okay, so I'm not cutting any, I'm just telling you what's going on, okay? So let's take a deep breath in. By the way, this isn't a blame game. I'm just giving you why stuff happens the way it does. And I know it's pretty heavy stuff. You guys are probably feeling a lot of heaviness on you. That's the control mechanisms that is, say, upon you. That's you're starting to feel. Okay? So as this wave washes through, as the lies, injustice, the control mechanisms that were supposed to, say, be gone a long time ago, if evolution worked the way it did in, say, nature, but it didn't in humans, now we're getting forced to evolve to the level where we should have been at 2020. So, and that's it's a huge pile of garbage that we have to delete really, really fast. So as we delete the garbage, all our insecurities that we are forced to leave, that we don't want to because we don't know any other way as a, say, society, we're going to hold on to. Okay, some of the insecurities is or blame game, because again, whenever there's, say, a distortion or people feel insecure, what do? They blame somebody or something outside of their, well, in this case, color, because it's always easier to blame somebody, right, that's outside of their, say, group, color, religion, sex, and so on. It's because of them I'm having a problem. It's because of them, our country's going downhill. It's because of them, our kids are getting whatever. Again, it's always an outside source, right? By the way, that's how wars are incited or started. They always have to pit you, the country, against somebody else outside that's different than you. Okay? It's always happened. So that's what people are comfortable with. Okay? So as this war, if you want to call it a war of consciousness, comes through and just wipes everything out. By the way, it's not a war, but because it's just something that is, it just like wipes everything out. So there's not like fighting back, although people will start to fight back. Government systems will start to fight back, right? As they gain more and more control. But then as they gain more and more control, the masses start to awaken. Everybody starts to awaken. And this is where, well, George Floyd comes in. So as people go back to their prejudices, because that's what they're comfortable with, right? The politically correctness that we've been playing, right? There's been laws to create political correctness. There's been laws to create equality. There's been laws to do a lot of things. But the underlying frequencies still exist. Just like in your personal life, right? You can have a massive house, say, for example, that denotes success. You can have $1 billion in the bank. But again, you would still be running, say, like distorted patterns underneath. So that success would magnify all the distortions that you are. So success doesn't fulfill in that case, okay? Because your underlying frequencies you didn't get rid of is still there, okay? Same thing with society here. As, say, we evolve into more and more success, more and more technological advances, the underlying frequencies that, say, exist within us, the distortions, the control mechanisms, the hatred, the prejudice, and the archaic, say, expressions of how we control other humans, right? The barbaric expressions, they still exist within us, but we just have laws and so on to, say, smooth it out or, suppress people. So again, this clarity washes through people's, say, natural instincts comes about. And this is what's happening. So in Minnesota, it is one of the, from what I'm reading or getting, and I talked about this a long time ago, it actually is it used to be one of the biggest Ku Klux Klan headquarters in Minnesota. It's kind of weird. You think it'd be in the South, but no, it's here in Minnesota. Along with that, a lot of, say, satanic type stuff happening around that space as well. So that's what people are used to. So the cop that killed George Floyd, if you look back into his background, grandparents or great-grandparents were part of that cult or hatred towards blacks. So and get this, and this is, you'd see how it all, the ugliness starts to show. Okay, and I'll use the police officer as an example because I have a right to. Okay, so what happens is that just like you all, right? A lot of your patterns are, say, rendered, or the way you operate yourself is from, say, your lineage of the past. Okay? So say that there's a lot of darkness or a lot of prejudice that runs in your family, like this cop. Okay? That's in your DNA, or that's in his DNA. He's just like brimming with hatred and so on, and he doesn't even understand why. Okay? It doesn't matter why. Okay? And I'll give you an example. Say and you can look this up. So people who've been in war, right? They're downline 4 or 5 generations that have no idea what war looks like. They run the same PTSD symptoms as somebody who's been in war. Why is that? Because it gets handed down in the DNA. Same thing with this cop. Right? A lot of hatred, a lot of prejudice, a lot of abuse patterns against, say, people that are not white. That's blended into him right off the bat. So he has no chance unless he awakens through some way to, say, remove that prejudice that he naturally, say, is involved in. Okay? Fortunately, he becomes a cop. So as this wave comes through, right, the lies, the distortions, the surface layer, or the laws that we're meant to control everything, right, subdue everything. Well, as this consciousness comes through and clears everything up, well, those laws don't matter, right? The consciousness is now exposed. The hatred is exposed. The abuse patterns are exposed. All those things that people have, say, suppressed will show and come to the surface. And there's going to be a great divide. This is the beginning. George Floyd was the beginning, or the major pivotal moment. It's not the beginning, but again, it worked its way up. There's been more and more, say, riots, more and more hatred and so on like that. It gets worse and worse, and then George Floyd kind of like popped the top off. So it's a pivotal moment for human consciousness, by the way, because as this, say, it takes momentum, and then that great divide. And again, I predicted this years ago, that as the consciousness awakens, the ugliness of everybody starts to awaken, and then, well, you start reacting or acting from the ugliness of, say, generations past, like in this officer's case. Okay, so he's just literally a robot, just dictated by all the patterns that the family lineage. And you might think, well, that's pretty far off. Really, look at your skin color, look at your eye color. It's just generation after generation after generation after generation, a rendition of all the things that have happened in the past. Right, of the past in your family lineage. You're the latest version of it, right? Along with skin color, eye color, prejudice patterns, abuse patterns, success patterns, and all the other patterns that you are.